What's up and welcome back to the Gridiron with Chance Aspen. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Make sure you subscribe down below and like this video. Now, enjoy this video. So, we have done the AFC East Division Deep Dive. Now we're going to move over to the AFC West Division Deep Dive. If you don't know already, how I do my Division Deep Dives is I tell you everything I like about each team and everything I don't like about each team. And then I give my prediction on what each team's record is going to be this year. So we're going to start with the defending back-to-back Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. Things I like about the Chiefs. Well, they have the best player in the world in Patrick Mahomes. I know everybody says, well, is the quarterback really the best player in the league? Yes. For the first time, in my opinion, probably a while, the best player in the sport plays quarterback, and he's on the Kansas City Chiefs. Mahomes just knows how to make plays. He knows when the game's on the line, what he needs to do. Other quarterbacks, even the other top quarterbacks in the league, they seem to fade in those moments. They don't really know what their team needs in certain situations. Mahomes knows exactly what the Chiefs need, and that's why they've won 3 Super Bowls in the last 4 years. The next thing I like about the Chiefs is they have better weapons this year. Look, last year was probably the year to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, in my opinion. They had no really top receiver in the league. They had the most drops in the NFL. Their wide receivers were terrible. Now, I will say this. Rashee Rice did come on late in the year to provide some sort of kind of top receiver, but he still wasn't even a top probably 15 wide receiver in the NFL, not even close. But adding guys like Marquise Brown from the Arizona Cardinals and drafting Xavier Worthy, those are 2 deep threats and 2 elite receivers, maybe not elite, but good receivers coming over to the Kansas City Chiefs. Another thing I like is they have a couple defensive difference makers. I think all the top teams have a couple difference makers on the defensive side of the ball. Those guys that can kind of blow up the play on defense. One is obviously Chris Jones. You saw what he did in the playoffs, obviously against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, where he basically put the O-line right in Josh Allen's lap and forced an incompletion, which really allowed them to win that football game. That was probably the best play of that game. That is the reason why they won that football game, and he is valuable to their success. He probably is their second best player now on the roster. I know they have Travis Kelce, but Chris Jones is, in my opinion, the second best player on that Kansas City Chiefs team. Another guy, and the second guy that I would say is a defensive difference maker, is Trent McDuffie. He, in my opinion, is probably the best defensive back in the National Football League right now. I know everybody talked about L'Jarius Sneed, and he's great. But I think Trent McDuffie, he makes so many big plays. His ability to break up passes and get pass breakups and play without committing any flags or committing pass interference penalties is so elite. He is such a fantastic defensive back. The next thing I like is they are the best play caller in the sport and the best big game defensive coordinator in the sport. Let's start off with the best play caller. Obviously, that is Andy Reid. Andy Reid is the most creative and best play caller in the NFL, without a question. His ability to create mismatches, to create confusion for defenses is elite. And then the best big game defensive coordinator is Steve Spagnuolo. I don't know if he's the best defensive coordinator, but he's for sure the best big game defensive coordinator. Like, you need to win a game and you're picking a defensive coordinator, I think it's going to be hard to say you're not picking Steve Spagnuolo to call that game for you. Things I don't like for the Kansas City Chiefs, questions at left tackle. They have some questions at left tackle. Now, I trust the Chiefs enough where I think they will figure it out, but I did have to write it down because it is just a question mark at that position, and it's a pretty important position. It's probably the third or fourth most important position on your roster. Another thing I don't like is the loss of L'Jarius Sneed. Now, they've proven that they can lose a big-time player, Tyreek Hill, and they can respond and still be as good as they were with that player. But it's still a big loss. He was a valuable piece to their Super Bowl runs. And then the last thing I don't like, and this is just, questions. Will they have a Super Bowl hangover? Will they come in slow? Will they play slow? Now, they've proven now that they can win on the road, but will that Super Bowl hangover cost them even more than just having to play on the road? I don't think so, but I wanted to write it down to talk about it. And here's my prediction on what their record is going to be. I don't think they're going to have a Super Bowl hangover, and I think they're going to finish the year 12-5. That's my prediction. Let's move on to the Los Angeles Chargers. Here's the things I like about the LA Chargers. I like how they're trying to get more physical at the line of scrimmage. Obviously, their first draft pick was Joe Alt out of Notre Dame. That proves that they're trying to win at the line of scrimmage. They're not trying to be the soft, kind of flashy Chargers of the past. They're trying to be a physically dominant football team. And that's thanks to the addition of their new head coach, Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh wants to play physical. I know he's an ex-quarterback, but he wants to run the ball, and he wants to play a physical brand of football. He wants to play mean and nasty. That's how Jim Harbaugh wants to play. The next thing I like is they have an elite quarterback in Justin Herbert. Now, I'm not as high on Justin Herbert as a lot of other people are, but he's still one of the elites in the game. He's still probably a top 8 or 9 guy in the sport. And I also like how they're going to take some pressure off of him to allow him to show that he is elite without having to drop him back 45 times a game and make him do all the work. And then I also talked about this a little bit. We'll talk about it more. Another thing that I like is they have a coach in Jim Harbaugh that wants to play a certain way. Physical. Physical, physical, physical. That's how he wants to play, which is great for the Chargers because the stuff they've lacked the last couple of years is physicality. They've lacked the ability to play physical, to get under center and run the ball 65, but majority of the game, more than 60% of the game. Another thing I like is how they're going to run the ball. They have to switch up their philosophy, and Jim Harbaugh is going to do that for them. They're going to come in and they're going to play that physical brand of football. Now, here's the big question. Can Jim Harbaugh get that instilled in them, that physical, dominant style of football? Can he instill that in his players this early, in year one? Can he do that? We'll see. Things I don't like about the LA Chargers, they're in the same division with the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Chiefs have kind of owned them. They struggle, like most teams, to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Can it change this year? Absolutely. Can Jim Harbaugh bring a different swagger to that football team and kind of make them believe that they can compete against the Chiefs? We'll see. Another thing I don't like is they've struggled to stop the run in recent years. And that's my biggest problem with them. They haven't really fixed the defensive tackle spot. And you need 2 guys in the interior defensive line to stop the run. And they got a couple young guys that could turn out to be something, but right now they're more just unknown. They haven't done enough to stop the run in recent years. Can they change it this year? Can Jim Harbaugh instill that in them? I don't know. Maybe he can, but maybe it's going to take a couple years. Another thing I don't like is they have a lot of injury concerns. They have a lot of guys that have struggled to stay on the field consistently, to play week after week after week after week. I'm hoping that new mindset that I think Jim Harbaugh is going to bring will kind of help that to fight off some of those kind of knick-knack injuries. Look, you can't help the season-ending, the severe injuries. You can't help that. That happens in football. It's a physical sport. But can he kind of get these guys to play through some stuff that maybe they haven't in the past? We'll see. The last thing I don't like is they don't have a real number one receiver. Now, I know they drafted Ladd McConkey in the second round. Last year's first-round pick, Quentin Johnson. But I don't know if any of those two guys are like elite number one receivers. So that's something that to be a little concerned about, is they don't have that kind of number one guy. My prediction on what their record is going to be this year is 7-10. I think they improve a little bit, but I think it takes at least a year for Jim Harbaugh to instill that mindset, that physicality mindset into his football team. Moving over in the AFC West to the Denver Broncos. Here's the things I like about the Denver Broncos. It's not much, but they should have a good offensive line. They should have a good offensive line. That's something that, looking at their roster, I'm pretty convinced that their offensive line should be pretty good this year, which is going to help a young quarterback in Bo Nix, which I assume they're going to start Bo Nix. I know there's rumbles about Jared Stidham or even Zach Wilson, but in my opinion, you got to start the guy you drafted early in Bo Nix. And having a good O-line helps the ability to start Bo Nix. It almost gives you more confidence that, yes, we can start this young quarterback. The next thing I like is Sean Payton is one of the best in the business. He's one of the best head coaches in the NFL. One of the best play callers in the NFL. He finally has his hand-picked quarterback in Bo Nix. You know, I'm sure he's hoping that he turns Bo Nix into Drew Brees. Is he going to be Drew Brees? Probably not. But I'm sure Sean Payton is going to try to do similar things that he did with Drew with Bo, which is probably not a bad thing. The last thing I like about the Denver Broncos, they should, like I talked about, their good offensive line, and they should have a good offensive line. They should be able to run the ball with Javonte Williams. I think Javonte Williams is one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL. And they should, with that offensive line, they should be able to run the ball, which again is going to help out Bo Nix. The more you can run the ball and the more you can help that young quarterback and protect him, the better off he is going to be early on. Things I don't like about the Denver Broncos, not enough playmakers on offense or defense. They just lack elite playmakers and difference makers on both sides of the ball. And in the NFL, a league that has so much talent, you need difference makers on both sides of the ball. You just do. The last thing I don't like is they're obviously playing a rookie quarterback. Now, I said some things that are going to help that rookie quarterback in Bo Nix. But look, he's a rookie. And he played in kind of a college-y system at Oregon. Now he's going to a pro system in the NFL. How is he going to react finally being in this pro-level system? It's always scary starting a rookie quarterback. It just is. And my prediction on what the Denver Broncos record is going to be, I think they're going to be 6-11. I think they will figure it out probably late in the year and win some games, but I still think it's going to be a tough year in Denver. The last team in the AFC West is the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's start off with the things I like. They should have an elite defensive line with Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, and obviously their first-round pick from last year, Tyree Wilson. We'll see what he turns into. But with those two guys, specifically, we'll leave Tyree for a second, but specifically Crosby and Wilkins, those two guys are going to be so good together because you have Crosby on the outside and Christian Wilkins on the inside. Just strictly with those two guys, they're going to be one of the best defensive lines in the NFL, without a doubt. Another thing that I like, they have some elite offensive playmakers. One being Devontae Adams, who I know is not getting talked about enough because the Raiders just aren't a very good football team. but he's still one of the best receivers in the NFL. 100% he's still a top, probably 7 or 8 receiver in the NFL. And then the guy they just drafted this year in the first round in Brock Bowers. He is going to be another difference maker on the offensive side of the ball. So in my opinion, the Raiders have enough difference makers. They got 2 for sure on the defensive side of the ball. We'll see what happens with Tyree Wilson. And then they got 2 for sure on the offensive side of the ball. So they got enough playmakers to be a decently good football team. Another thing I like is how hard they'll play for their coach, Antonio Pierce. You saw it last year. They played so hard for Antonio Pierce. Even when they were out of the playoff race, even when they had no shot, they went to the Chiefs on Christmas Day and beat Kansas City. I mean, not many teams are going to Kansas City and beating the Chiefs. Don't get that twisted. And that just shows that even if they're out of it, they're going to play hard for their head coach. And that's such an underrated thing in today's leagues, in today's sport, is how hard is this team going to play for this specific head coach? How hard is this head coach going to get his players to play for him? And I know the Raiders are going to play for Antonio Pierce. Things I don't like. I talked about the playmakers and difference makers they have on each side of the ball, but here's why they're not going to be a very successful football team this year. They don't have a good quarterback at all. Gardner Minshew is decent. He's not good. He's not a guy that you can take to the playoffs and go win a Super Bowl with. And that's the number one reason why, even though they have playmakers on this side, playmakers on that side, they don't have a good enough quarterback to win at the highest level. That's their biggest problem. And until they fix that, I don't care how many playmakers you have on each side of the football, you're never going to be a very successful team. The last thing I don't like, I'm just worried about their secondary. They don't really have any top guy to be a shutdown corner. And that can be scary sometimes, especially when you're facing some of these elite receivers in the NFL. And my prediction for what the Raiders' record is going to be this year, they're going to be 4-13. They're going to struggle because their quarterback just isn't good enough. But that's my AFC West Division Deep Dive. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Make sure you like this video and subscribe down below, and have an awesome day.